bombed and sunk in the Sunda Straits by a superior Japanese force. There are only 229 survivors, I remember, of the complement of 682.
Yeah, here's an interesting title. The Scrap Iron Flotilla. 5 very famous destroyers, weren't they?
Well, that's the Stuart, Vampire, Vendetta, Voyager and Waterhen. I think you should be able to see them on their banner.
And that's where they fought.
Well, the Vendetta, of course, once again, there are now 2 ships. They're both destroyers bearing this name and extending the battle honours from the Second World War through Borneo all the way to Vietnam. Then the N-class destroyers, there were 5 of those, highly manoeuvrable destroyers. That was the Napier, Nizam, Nestor, Norman and Nepal. Very heavily armed, and they served in all the theatres of war.
And they were in all sorts of weird corners too, weren't they?
Indeed. In fact, there you've still got the Vendetta marching through. And now here's your N-class destroyers coming through. Napier, Nizam, Nestor, Norman and Nepal.
And as I was saying, they got into all sorts of weird corners of the globe doing all sorts of jobs. You'd know about that with your experience in odd bits and pieces, Peter.
Well, the interesting thing, of course, is the N-class not only served in the European theatre and also in the Middle East, but they also served in Murmansk and Archangel in the Soviet Union and also in Madagascar.
A couple of very chilly places.
Then, of course, the Q-class. I think we glanced very quickly there, and you can see, I think, the 3rd banner behind. We've got Vendetta,
yes,
then we've got the
N-class,
and then the Q-class.
Yes. Now, there's the Quiberon and the Quick March, wasn't there?
Yes, there are only 2 destroyers of this class, and they were transferred from the Royal Navy, and they came to the Australian Navy in early 1942.
They were converted then to anti-submarine frigates, weren't they?
Yes, probably one of the most unpopular tasks, apart from minesweeping, I think, in the Navy. We are, of course, being plagued by that worry of earlier ANZAC Day marches, and that there's always a hold-up somewhere. There's marching a little slow at the front, and it magnifies until it gets back to the middle, and then the rear end where people have to stand and mark time.
Arunta, first of the heavily armed, very fast tribal class destroyers, and that was built at Cockatoo Island, I think, wasn't it?
Well, this of course holds a lesson for us now, and that this extremely first-class ship was built in Australia. Arunta, of course, was one of the tribal class, and you can understand the N class, those beginning with N, and then those of the Q class beginning with Q, such as Quick Match.
And that's followed by another tribal class, I think the Warramunga.
Well, this one, I think, earned the reputation of one of the longest steaming times before being pensioned off. I understand her pennant went well over her stern for her last commission.
I bet it did. 500,000 miles. Quite incredible.
And there you see the banner, of course.
One of the big lads. Yes.
One of the big ones. So this cruiser had one of the most fine records of service, and for a long time was the flagship of the Royal Australian Navy before we put the flag onto the aircraft carriers. Those men, incidentally, in Australia, sailed something like 3 times around the world in operational miles of sailing.
Quite incredible, isn't it? They seem a very happy crew, don't they?
Well, as you say, crew. These people perhaps are closer than anybody else, having served on board a ship or inside a submarine. And
True.
Of course, I imagine I've very little experience of it, but there's no way.
Well, on a cruiser, it's quite possible you'd sail with people that you never met, you know.
Really?
Oh yes, yes. Yes, perhaps not on a light cruiser, but on a medium or a heavy cruiser, you'd quite often sail with people, and you'd meet them perhaps ashore, and say, where are you from, and they'd happen to be from the same ship. Quite incredible.
I remember being on the United States ship Forrestal once and getting completely and utterly lost.
They're like a labyrinth inside, aren't they?
They are indeed, with sort of 1,500, 2,000 man crew.
But I'll guarantee these lads that we're watching now would know their way around them. Off we go again.
Well, that's a patriotic.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, let's be patriotic if you like. Now here's a heavy cruiser, one of the bigger cruisers.
From memory, I think she was a Kent class.
Yes, she was, and she was lost in 1942.
That was during the Battle of Savo Island.
That's right.
Yes.
Didn't the American government honour the Canberra?
Yes, in fact, they named one of their cruisers the Canberra, and again another heavy cruiser, the Shropshire. She again came to the Royal Australian Navy from the Royal Navy. Shropshire, by the way, took the Victory contingent to England in 1946. And Gascoigne, first frigate commissioned into the Royal Australian Navy, and that came into service towards the end of the war, and she served with the Americans again.
And she's followed by the Warrego and the Sydney.
Once again, the Warrego was a 1,000-ton sloop built at Cockatoo Island in the early 1940s. She was the sister ship to the Swan and, of course, the Yarra of sad memory.
Few uniforms there, Peter.
Good to see that.
The front is indeed. The HMAS Sydney Association, you know, it's got 11 admirals and 5 commodores amongst its members.
Well, look at their not battle honours, but look at the places they served on their banner there. There's the First World War Sydney again. Once again, the name being transferred. First World War Sydney, then the cruiser Sydney, which was in the Mediterranean, and then the aircraft carrier, which went to Korea, Vietnam, and of course was then used in the trooping role. Anti-submariners now coming. The anti-submarine branch, of course, very specialised.
The ping merchants.
Well, of course, the ping, because of the sonar going in and back again. Well, there's the Anti-Submarine Officers Association and the Anti-Submariners marching. Very specialised group of servicemen. Very specialised trade. And of course, this is where it's all at now, as nuclear missile and nuclear technology goes underwater.
These could have been the forerunners of that, I suppose, Peter.
Oh, indeed. Now we've got the armed merchant cruisers, the Manora, Canimbla. And I don't think we can... Yes, there it is. It's the HMS Westralia. Now, in the early years, of course, Westralia was in the eastern waters and helped evacuate the women and children from Nara and Ocean Island. It then came very close to the army in a landing ship, an LSI, landing ship infantry.
Now, behind these are men from the corvettes. You know, the medium-sized ships used to roll so horribly.
Well, of course, there were more corvettes, which were the work ships of all navies. More corvettes than anything else, and any other class serving in the Royal Australian Navy. 56 of them, I'm proud to say, were built in Australian shipyards. If any, they could be built there again. And they were very effective, especially in the anti-submarine work. And they got the unpopular duties, such as minesweeping and escorting. Fine band again.
Now that's the Bankstown City Brass you can see in your picture now.
Always welcome. I do like the, I do hope I'm not being offensive, little girl or little boy, little girl.
The number's almost as big as she is. Stepping out well though.
Very well indeed. I hope she might last the distance. It's a long way for a little girl of that age. First class band.
Now, the HMS Hobart Association. compliments from both the RAN and ships bearing this name.
We missed, I think, some of the Corvette class coming through, but there is the Hobart, of course. Hobart, commissioned in 1938, that was the first Hobart. And once again, the name of the Hobart was carried all the way through.
Now that had duties in the Indian Ocean, I think, mainly, didn't it, and the Red Sea?
I'm not too sure. If memory serves me, it was the Far East in Batavia, Singapore, Coral Sea and the Pacific Ocean.
Yes, then she was in the Eastern Med.
Well, I think you know more about that than I, Tony.
As a matter of fact, the Duke of Edinburgh was a crew member for a time.
Really?
Yes. And then she returned to Japan after the war with the British Occupation Forces headquarters. The second Hobart, a guided missile destroyer, very up to date.
Of course, first Hobart's remembered by the Army primarily because she took the first, or escorted the first contingent of the RAF to the Middle East. Oh, what a wonderful thing to see. So far up the march, the hospital ships. And there, of course, is the Mananda.
That did 6 years of service, carried nearly 15,000 patients, and also travelled close on 500,000 miles. Absolutely vital, the hospital ships.
And of course, what a wonderful haven they provided with those ladies who manned them. The nurses from going from the horrors of a battlefield and being transferred to that wonderful serenity of a hospital ship. At least serene for those who were lying in bed, but a massive work for those who were manning them.
Now, the Murchison,
yes,
one of the 4 Bay-class frigates built for the Royal Australian Navy, 44-45.
She saw a lot of active service, actually, in Korea. And as you can see, she's got their Baron of the Hand.
Has indeed.
Well, there's the banner of the 2nd AIF now marching through. And the hospital ships of the 2nd AIF. And again, we mustn't forget that these ladies who manned those ships were exposed to that greatest threat of submarine warfare.
And they extended far beyond the end of the war, didn't they?
Indeed. And what a wonderful first time this is. We've now got the Royal Australian Naval Reserve. Again, people who give up their time voluntarily to serve as a very valuable... Whoever believes that bands should be phased out of any military force should look at these and see what a wonderful morale builder they are. They make a march, and one drummer and one bugler, one fife man can rally a regiment, as they have been many times in the past.
They certainly have in history.
Now that is a very fine sight. Australia's part-time soldiers, people who give up their weekends, their holidays.
What a smartly turned out body of men. You know, in civilian life, Commander Wybrow is a Boeing 747 first officer of a Qantas. Well, we're in safe hands if his flying matches the position of his men.
That is a fine sight. Royal Australian Naval Reserve, marching behind for the first time in 1983 Anzac Day March, marching behind their own band. The Royal Australian Naval Reserve.
And as Peter said, these are all part-time sailors.
Next time you see one of those advertisements on television, this is the end result. Just think of it. This is the end result of those people who serve as a reserve.
That's a jolly good turnout, isn't there?
Excellent turnout. Excellent turnout.
This is the year of the reserves for Anzac Day.
Well, if that's their first turnout, they can come any time they choose.
Indeed they can.
well.
They look as though they've amalgamated these two bands.
I think they have. I think they've amalgamated for the first year, the police band and the pipers.
Military and the pipe band.
Yes, it's the police, military and the police pipe band. Marching together for the first time on Anzac Day, march together. And combining the two quite wonderfully, I think. And once again, I think a young lady of the Air League from this distance as carrying their number.
Yes, and leading the contingent, Deputy Commissioner Barney Ross from Police Headquarters.
But of course, the band masters always lose pride of place to the drum major, and that is a first-class example of a drum major. Well, that, I think, Tony, brings us to an end of the naval part of the march.
Yes, it does.
And there the contingent of the New South Wales Police Force, led, I think, by Deputy Commissioner Barney Ross.
Yes, that's him coming up. There he is. Now, look for men in light blue berets. That means that they served with the United Nations contingent in Cyprus.
These, of course, are ex-service men and women who are currently serving in the police force in the uniformed or plainclothes section, who are marching as they choose to in their police unit. I'm, in fact, scanning, Tony, to see if we can see any of your blue berets.
Yes, I haven't seen one yet.
I think large numbers of them are in Canberra, coming from the Commonwealth Police, who always sends a contingent. And let's not forget the parking police contingent.
Who could forget the parking police?
Let's forget their job for the moment. The first-class ex-service men and women. And we mustn't forget, too, that the parking police came into existence from a small corps of incapacitated servicemen.
Now the fire brigade, led by their bands. They've chosen to march as a unit here today, lining up behind Superintendent Arthur Lewis.
Once again, ex-service men and women who choose to march in their fire brigade unit. They carry army traditions to one of the most difficult, I think, and dangerous day-to-day works as firemen. Actually, in the First World War, the fire brigade actually formed 4 battalions for service.
All firemen?
All firemen,
Good
yes. And the men today you see marching behind their own band are veterans of World War II, Korea, Southeast Asia, and Vietnam.
Apparently they've marched here directly from a memorial service conducted at Fire Brigade headquarters.
I think they're doing it properly. They're a well-turned-out unit.
Well-disciplined, yes. Great
pride in their work with a first-class band and having had a memorial service beforehand.
Now this is the New South Wales Transport Institute band. And here they are, the contingents of personnel from the State Rail Authority and the Urban Transit Authority, led by Mr. R.D. Begg and Mr. Bill McClatchy.
Of course, many who work for these authorities choose to march with their own battalions or their own divisional groupings. But in this case, they're marching as a body from the SRA and the UTA. In fact, I think that's the first time I've seen that banner.
Yes, I have. I can't remember having seen it before, but it's a very familiar symbol, isn't it? In this Land Rover, just coming into sight now, is Major General Ken Ether, CBCBE, DSOED, commanding the 2nd AIF. Major General Ether, March Commander last year, an honour passed today to the Navy. And he's accompanied by Mr. Norman Rose, President of the 2nd AIF Council.
Well, what a wonderful grouping there of General Ether, and immediately behind him the banner of the great 2nd Australian Imperial Force. General Ether, of course, came from the Citizens Forces and then trained in the 2nd First. He fought in the early campaigns in Libya, took charge of the 25 Brigade of the 7th Division to halt the Japanese advance on Moresbury. And then he led the action to regain control of Kokoda.
Wasn't the 2nd AIF raised at the beginning of World War II?
Yes, indeed. The great 2nd Australian Imperial Force, with its great divisions, was raised for service at home and overseas, and its name recalls its gallant predecessor, the 1st Australian Imperial Force, which, under the control of General Brudenell White, the 2nd AIF became a cohesive force in January 1940. And in January 1940, a brigade of the 6th Division south of Palestine, and that began 5 years of wartime service that took the 2nd AIF to some 28 countries.
The band of the Royal New South Wales Lancers.
Cavalrymen, an excellent turnout of the RNSW.
Here's the Royal Australian Armoured Corps.
Of course, first in line, always taking pride of place, the Armoured Corps, and led this year by Lieutenant General Sir Mervyn Brogan, KB, a former Chief of the General Staff. In fact, I was rash enough to mention last year he was known privately as General Basher Brogan, who got so many letters that I wouldn't dare do it again next year.
They have a rather wild slogan, the Armoured Corps.